School leaders. We are in a brand new unit. We are looking for the next 6 weeks out of the book of Daniel. And the lessons are going to be centered around this. Game changer, how to impact your world. And this week we'll be looking at develop conviction. That'll be out of Daniel chapter 1. Then we'll be looking at pray fervently, stand courageously, live humbly, confront sin, and act faithfully. So that's where we're headed for the next 6 weeks. Now this Sunday's lesson is a very familiar story. It's a story about Belshazzar, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah. Now, that may not sound familiar to you or to your students, but as you read the text, you'll know that what we're looking at is the story of Daniel, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. I think it's very interesting that we know Belshazzar by his Hebrew name, Daniel, but we know the other three by their Babylonian names. So, anyway, a little trivia there if you want to throw that out to your class this week. We're going to look at how Daniel and his fellow Jewish buddies refused the food that the king offered them. It wasn't that they were on a hunger strike or anything like that, but it was because it went against their convictions. And that's the topic of the lesson this week is develop convictions and how important that is to have convictions. Now it's important to let your class know that you've got to have convictions. You've got to know where that line is that you're not going to cross. With Daniel, the line here happened to be with the food because it was against the Jewish dietary laws. However, it's important to note that he found it okay, though, to learn about the Babylonian culture and the language. I know on Facebook in recent days I've seen several posts and shares of several stories actually about a mother who is enraged that her son or her child has to learn about Islam in the public schools. Well, I remember 40 plus years ago learning about Islam and the 5 pillars of Islam in 7th grade social studies. You know, learning about something you don't agree with is not a sin. In fact, I've been a student of and a teacher of many different classes on cults. I tend to find that a little interesting. And having the knowledge about something, like I said, that you don't agree with, that's not bad. But not having convictions, that leads to doing whatever seems right at the time. And of course, what do we call that? Situational ethics. It's important to perhaps tell your class to distinguish between preferences and convictions. With a preference, I am the source of authority. I'll give you some examples. I prefer this style of music over that style. I prefer to read out of a certain translation of the Bible. Those are preferences. A conviction, however, has Scripture as the source of authority. What does the Bible say about this topic? Regardless of what my preferences are. And if the Bible disagrees with my preference, then I'm the one that needs to change. I'm wrong. Preferences can change. Convictions shouldn't. Now the Bible warns us about this, about not having convictions. In Ephesians chapter 4, verse 14, Paul is talking about spiritually weak people here when he says, "Then we will no longer be infants, tossed back and forth by the waves, and blown here and there by every wind of teaching and by the cunning and craftiness of people in their deceitful scheming." So when we don't have convictions, we're like that. We're just tossed about like a wave in the sea, like a reed in the wind, just bending to whatever popular opinion is at the time. So it's important to have those convictions. It's good to have preferences and be flexible in those, but convictions is where we need to stand our ground. Now don't forget to tie the lesson into the overall unit theme, and that is what? How to impact your world. A good question to ask at the close of each lesson for the next 6 weeks might be something like this. If you truly put into practice what we talked about today, how would that impact your world? Or specifically for this week, if you truly developed convictions and stuck to them, how could you better impact your world for Christ? I think that's a good question to leave with your students at the end of this week. That's all I have for now. Next week we'll be looking at praying fervently. Hope to see you Sunday.